Our next testifier is Mr. Michael Bekesha, Esquire with Judicial Watch Incorporated. If Mr. Bekesha could take the microphone, and whenever you're ready there, sir, we're ready to hear your testimony.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Bekesha, an attorney at Judicial Watch. Judicial Watch is a Washington, D.C.-based public interest group dedicated to promoting transparency, integrity, and accountability in government's politics and the law. Thank you, Chairman Metcalf, for having me here today. It is an honor for me, on behalf of Judicial Watch, to appear before this committee. As you know, the illegal alien problem is an important issue, not only in Pennsylvania, but around the country. Judicial Watch advances its mission through education, investigations, and when necessary, litigation. We educate Americans about the problems associated with illegal immigration. We investigate and uncover how the government fails to enforce the law. We go to court to try and defend the strong enforcement of our nation's immigration laws and the state's authority to police within its borders. Regardless of what you may have heard, the immigration debate is not abating. There continues to be a vast disconnect between the American people and the federal government. For example, Judicial Watch conducted an election day poll of actual voters in partnership with the polling company. We asked whether local law enforcement officers should be more involved, less involved, or as involved as they are now in areas touching on immigration. An impressive 53% of voters thought local law enforcement officers should be more involved, and 26% of voters thought that police should be as involved as they currently are. Although Americans overwhelmingly want the rule of law enforced, the federal government continues to look for ways to avoid enforcing the law. Moreover, and more startlingly, the federal government has taken the rare action of suing two states, Arizona and Alabama, for their efforts to assist the federal government in enforcement and to regulate within their borders. In other words, the federal government is proactively preventing states from policing within its borders and protecting its citizens. With respect to Arizona, Judicial Watch currently represents the Arizona State Legislature in its efforts to SB 1070, the latest in a series of law enforcement provisions enacted by the Arizona State Legislature under its well-recognized police powers. Since 2002, the Arizona State Legislature has enacted various initiatives to ensure the safety of its citizens, and the most recent and the most significant enactment was SB 1070. And Arizona's efforts have overwhelmingly succeeded. According to the Police Law Enforcement Association, the organization that represents the rank-and-file police officers in Phoenix, violent and property crimes are at a 20-year low in 2009. Similarly, arrests in Phoenix have dropped by over 10% from 2009 to 2010. Although City Hall will not recognize the effect of the legislative initiatives on crime rates, the Phoenix Law Enforcement Association has no doubts. The various law enforcement provisions enacted by the Arizona State Legislature have overwhelmingly worked. Therefore, I am pleased to be here today to support this committee's efforts to protect the citizens of this Commonwealth from the adverse effects of illegal immigration. First, let me reiterate why we are here today. We are here today because the federal government has decided not to enforce the law. As you are probably well aware, the Supreme Court recently decided in favor of Arizona in a legal challenge to its E-Verify law. During oral argument in that case, Justice Scalia commented that nobody would have thought that the federal government would not enforce immigration laws. Of course, no one would have expected that. States such as Pennsylvania have no choice but to enact legislation designed to minimize the adverse effects of the federal government's lack of enforcement. And everyone knows that proactive legislation works. It's clear in Arizona, and neither the federal government nor the interest groups challenging the various laws around the country claim that the laws do not protect the public from additional lawlessness. The only issue is whether a specific state law is preempted by federal law. Contrary to what the federal government continuously claims, not every law related to aliens is preempted by federal law. We have a system of dual sovereignty, and only state laws that regulate immigration are de facto preempted by federal law. And importantly, only the determination of who should and should not be admitted into this country and the conditions on which that person may remain is regulation of immigration. Therefore, as long as states do not interfere with federal enforcement activity, states have the authority to legislate in areas touching on immigration. The National Security Begins at Home legislative package does not impose new restrictions on the manner an alien may enter the country, nor does it create any new requirements that such individuals, how they may remain. The various pieces of legislation before the committee today simply codify already existing enforcement provisions of federal law. And according to the Supreme Court, states have the authority to act with respect to illegal aliens where such action mirrors federal objectives and furthers a legitimate state goal. And let me address several of the proposed initiatives before the committee today and explain how they not only mirror federal objectives but also further a legitimate state goal. House Bill 41 is consistent with federal law and seeks to curb state and local spending. Under federal law 8 U.S.C. 1621, illegal aliens are not eligible for state or local benefits. HB 41 therefore simply codifies this provision and requires individuals who apply for such benefits to provide identification of lawful presence so that state and local agencies do not provide benefits contrary to federal law. Moreover, HB 41 furthers a legitimate state goal because Pennsylvania taxpayers currently spend over $500 million a year on state and local benefits for illegal aliens. House Bill 439 simply reinforces federal law. Federal law 8 U.S.C. 1324A states that it is unlawful to knowingly hire an illegal alien for employment. HB 439 does no more than provide guidance to certain licensees on what procedures to undertake to avoid violating federal law. Moreover, it creates penalties for those licensees that fail to take affirmative steps to follow federal objectives. Finally, it is well established that states possess broad authority under their police powers to regulate employment to protect workers within the state. HB 439 simply protects the jobs of those who may lawfully work from those who cannot lawfully work under federal law. House Bill 798 and 801 do not give state and local law enforcement officers any new authority. They already have the authority to investigate possible violations of criminal provisions of federal immigration laws, including the authority to inquire about a person's immigration status. Therefore, these bills simply define in what circumstances and in what manner state and local law enforcement officers may inquire about a person's immigration status. Moreover, these bills reinforce federal law 1373, which prevents an arresting officer from prohibiting or any way restricting any of its employees from sending to or receiving from the federal government information regarding an individual's immigration status. In addition to the obvious effects of violent and property crimes on the public, taxpayers spend $74 million yearly for costs associated to police, corrections, and courts for illegal aliens. House Bills 810 and 865 also reinforce federal law 8 U.S.C. 1373 by seeking to prevent municipalities from becoming safe havens for illegal aliens. Many cities around the country have adopted sanctuary policies to the detriment of their citizens. Houston is one of those cities. Judicial Watch currently represents Jocelyn Johnson, a Houston police sergeant whose husband, a Houston police officer who was shot and killed by an illegal alien who had been previously deported, re-entered illegally, and subsequently had multiple interactions with the police. However, because of the Houston Police Department's sanctuary policy, the illegal alien remained free in Houston to continue his lawlessness. Unfortunately, such a tragedy is not an isolated incident in Houston. In fact, Officer Johnson's death is one of 4 deaths of a Houston police officer at the hands of previously deported illegal aliens in the past few years. Clearly, sanctuary cities only favor one group: illegal aliens. Therefore, HB 810 and HB 865 are essential to ensure such safe havens are not established in Pennsylvania. House Bill 858 seeks to replicate the Legal Arizona Workers Act in Pennsylvania. As I briefly mentioned before, in May, the Supreme Court held that Arizona's unauthorized alien employment law does not conflict with federal immigration law. Moreover, the court reinforced that states have broad authority under their police powers to regulate employment within their borders, and more specifically, to prohibit the employment of illegal aliens. Therefore, federal law clearly does not preempt HB 858. Let me conclude by saying that the National Security Begins at Home legislative package could not be clearer. Its intended purpose is to protect the citizens of Pennsylvania from the adverse effects of illegal immigration. As a whole, these legislative initiatives mirror federal objectives and further a legitimate state goal. They ensure compliance of federal law in an attempt to curb the effects of the estimated 140,000 illegal aliens residing in Pennsylvania, the effects including an approximate $1.4 billion yearly costs associated to healthcare, education, incarceration, and other expenses. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bekesha. We appreciate your being with us today and appreciate your testimony, and would be willing to take questions from the members for Mr. Bekesha. With your work on the Arizona case and some of what you've heard today here during the hearings related to E-Verify, could you talk to us a little bit about how E-Verify is working in Arizona since that was upheld? Do you have it?
Sure. I can even talk about, during the time that the case was proceeding through the courts, the statute was in effect, and the E-Verify law has continued for about the past 3 years. And during that time, there have only been, I believe the Chamber of Commerce has had 2 or 3 enforcement actions during that time against corporations. For the most part, the system's working. Corporations are using the E-Verify system to check any potential employees. And if the corporations use the system, and even if the system says that this person's can lawfully work and that person may not be able to lawfully work, that corporation is protected under the law. It's the same as the proposed bill here. The system does work, and even the Chamber of Commerce down in Arizona would tell you that as well.
Now, as I understand, one of the laws that's been passed in the past by Arizona relates to requiring the use of the SAVE system to verify eligibility of an alien before they're allowed to receive welfare benefits. It was kind of surprising to me to have testified here today by one of our law enforcement officers that when they've contacted the Public Department of Welfare in Pennsylvania and had a criminal in their custody that was utilizing welfare cards that were not their own for welfare benefits, that they did not instruct them to take those cards and let them continue on down the street with that same man to continue to perpetrate welfare fraud. Does the Arizona laws that they change, have they dealt with an issue like that? Are you aware, or is that something that might be more of a Pennsylvania problem based on our welfare department?
Nothing specifically, I would say, addresses that issue in Arizona, but it's the general. The idea of the laws is to provide the states with opportunities to prevent adverse effects to immigration. These are federal laws. Everybody complains about the problem with the immigration system, but that's the federal system. The states must follow federal law. And for example, for local and state benefits, states cannot provide these benefits under federal law. So all the legislative bills, all the proposed bills here, all they do is prevent Pennsylvania from essentially breaking federal law. And I just want to also follow up with, there were questions and comments before about, is this a Pennsylvania problem? Well, a lot of people say the problem is, just down in the Southwest, just down in Arizona, or maybe down in Texas. But just last week, an illegal alien ran over and killed an individual during an automobile accident in Massachusetts. And it was a DUI, and that alien, the facts are still coming out, but that individual was arrested in 2008 for assault and battery of a police officer and had several traffic violations. And the local police there reported to ICE, and they did nothing about it. And so, situations that happen in Houston are now happening up in Massachusetts. So you may not have many examples today in Pennsylvania, but that doesn't mean you won't have examples in the near future.
Darryl.
Representative Vitale.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony today. I know nothing about immigration law. I'm learning a lot today, but as I understand it, generally this E-Verify system is to catch people who should not be working but are, and I guess one of the theoretical reasons is to protect American jobs. And then contrasted to that was the testimony of Kay Hollenbach, who testified that she can't get standard American citizens to do some of the things. And I've heard that before with regard to jobs, about, you know, various cleaning things and other things that are hard and not paying a lot, and so forth. So there's a lot of anecdotal evidence out there. Do you have any evidence with regard to the displacement of jobs that would be held by citizens, and how the implementation of this E-Verify would affect that? In other words, I mean, can you quantify a displacement of the jobs of citizens? Do you have any evidence to show that this quote-unquote immigration problem is displacing jobs that would be held by natural U.S. citizens?
I don't have any specific evidence on that. My focus is the rule of law, and the rule of law, federal law, states that employers cannot employ these individuals that can't lawfully work. And, you know, the testifier here before, there are plenty of programs under federal law where you can get migrant worker visas and permits for seasonal workers. Agriculture, they spend the most money lobbying, and they have their own rules and regulations so that they can hire workers when they need them. So all Pennsylvania is doing is trying to say, if the federal law doesn't allow individuals to work, they can't work in Pennsylvania because it's against federal law. It's the same as, you know, child labor laws and any other instance. I have a follow-up question, if I could. So I mean, we have to direct our law enforcement in the areas that are really effectuating real policy. So it's important to know if there's real public policy benefits to enforcing, for example, this E-Verify. And if, in fact, it's really not displacing citizens' jobs, then maybe we ought to be devoting our law enforcement resources to other laws. I mean, don't you agree that that's important to know if a good public policy, real, backed up by statistics, is important? Don't you think that would be good things to know before we really start to enforce this with too many of our resources? It is, and as I mentioned in my testimony, working with the Arizona State Legislature as well as the Phoenix law enforcement has numbers that show that violent and property crimes decreased to a 20-year low in 2009, and that, you know, the jails are less crowded in 2010 than they were previously, and the Phoenix Law Enforcement Association believes strongly that the reason for that is, starting in 2002, the Arizona legislature has taken steps such as the E-Verify law, and that there are hard facts in how the public is protected because of such laws.
Now, you say believe strongly. I mean, has there been studies, have there been statistics to trace this cause-effect relationship? Can you point to some university study or some study by some you know, the Bureau of Labor Statistics or whoever would study this stuff? Has there been a causal relationship established between, you know, E-Verify and lower crime rates that has satisfied, you know, statisticians and other people who have to sort of verify this, as opposed to just any studies there to back up what you're saying?
I mean, there's studies. The police union down there has performed studies. Like everything, there's statistics. You know, everybody can skew numbers.
So there is a study out there that draws a relationship between E-Verify and lower crime rates.
The police union talks about it, and they explain what they've seen over the course of years, being the rank and file, being on the streets, and seeing the crime rate drop.
Is it an impression, or
Representative Vitale, we appreciate your question. We do have a question from Representative Briggs, and appreciate your several questions to Mr. Bekesha. Representative Briggs.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to ask this one quick question. You have been talking a lot about Arizona, and you've been following it very closely. Is there any statistics that show the revenue that the state has lost or gained based on the legislation? Are people working more, or people moving out of the state? Could you address that a little bit?
I'm not aware of any specific statistics on that. All I would say is the Arizona governor, the Arizona state legislature, the Arizona attorney general all believe this is good for the state, and they continue to fight back against the federal government that is trying to prevent them from having this go into effect. So I don't have any specific statistics, but based on that, it must be good for the state.
Thank you, Representative Briggs. Thank you very much, Mr. Bekesha. We appreciate you being with us here from Judicial Watch today, and thank you for taking the time to be here.
Thank you very much.
We now